Ready? Yes. Okay. Good morning. My name is Shoba Bandi-Rao, and I teach at the Borough of Manhattan Community College, and I teach linguistics and ESL writing. So it's called intensive writing there. So today my presentation is going to be about learning writing using mobile applications, and it's called learning on the go. So I'm going to stop my timer here. Okay, so one of the things that I notice when I'm teaching ESL is the kind of persistent errors that you find in student papers. And even after you've gone over the rule, and they understand it, but when they're speaking fast or when they're writing fast, they don't have enough time. You see these, some of these errors appear constantly. For instance, with the relative clause, you don't invert the subject and the verb. So can you tell me how do we make pancakes? In June 16th, I will go to Texas, or I have work all night. These are rules very helpful. They bought others things at the store. So different language speakers make different types of errors. So one of the things is, how do we get them to work on these grammar items that grammatical rules that are persistent, So a couple of reasons for the persistence of these errors: age, because many of them are learning the language as an adult and past the critical period, and some of them have limited proficiency. They come into the country with limited proficiency, and also they kind of it's survival communication. They're kind of forced to speak the language before they can even master it. And so then, some of those incorrect forms become a pattern, and then, they're reinforced after some time. And there's also lack or little corrective feedback that they receive with the people that they're speaking with. And so what are some of the challenges for the ESL writing instructor, right? So what do we concentrate on? I mean, I would much rather concentrate on the use of the language, how they say it, as opposed what they're saying in the paper or in an essay, as opposed to how they're saying it. I don't want to focus too much on grammar in my class. I want to focus more on the content. So there's a battle between function over form. And there's also limited class time for practicing skills. And also limited study time. Many of the students at the two-year colleges, they're working as well, and so they don't have a lot of time to study. And so now what do we do? Where do we find this time so that they can practice some of these skills? So the small chunks of time. So this is something that I've been working on now, because we live in a large urban city where students have to commute, and they're sitting in the train for about 30 minutes or 40 minutes. Some of them have longer commutes. So I said, because I constantly read. I get a lot of work done while I'm on the subway. And I have my phone with me all the time. So I said, how? So why not use the phone to practice something, to do some work, right? So commute, subway or bus, or even between classes. Because sometimes I see students just sitting there doing nothing, in the hallways. So I'd much rather they do something. Not even playing Candy Crush, so that kind of bothers me. Or sometimes while they're waiting in line. So, I said, let's try and make use of these small chunks of time. Because sometimes when I ask students to devote us kind of an evening to study, it's difficult. Because they have families, they've got work, they've got a lot of other things, and even when they have a little time, they are exhausted, they are tired. So I thought maybe the small chunks of time may be a way to go. Again, it doesn't lead to deeper learning, but I want to explore this to whatever extent. So mobile learning comes in handy because we have our phones with us all the time. And but as with any new technology, what we see is, whenever new technology comes in, the first thing that we see is there's a huge hype, right? And everybody's excited about it, they're gung-ho about it, and wow, it's the thing, it's going to solve everyone's problems. And then there is a trough of disillusionment, and slowly kind of plateaus, and it's somewhere in the middle, And so that is, and we've seen this kind of thing go on with so many different things. It's from the 60s, right? In the 60s, you had programmed instruction. And in the 70s, you had computer-assisted instruction. And in the 80s, we had hypermedia, media. In the 1990s, we had the multimedia, and in the 2000s, we had online learning, and in 2010, it's the personal learning, personalized learning. And in 2020, I mean, like, there is going to be more open learning, and it's already started with the MOOCs, right? So we've seen this, and history kind of repeats itself. And so it's the same thing with mobile technology, too. I'm a huge proponent of mobile phones. In fact, I've programmed my phone to be my remote control for my TV. So very often I can't find my remote control, but I know I can find my phone, so I've programmed my phone. So it does a lot of things for me. But again, I know the limitations of this too, because a lot of research is coming out, which says that when people read something on a Kindle or on the screen, they don't retain it as much as they would if they did use paper. And this is really important because when I find myself doing that, there's a new word that I need to learn, I write it down. And if it's a word that I really want to remember, I write it down on paper because there's something about that paper and pen. It's not that I'm sure we will evolve. This has existed. This has been there not even for a decade, right? It's just been there for 5 years. I'm sure in due process, in about 50 years, our brains will adapt and we will learn to remember things better on a screen too. But I think because we've been with paper and pencil for so long, that I think we've evolved to use the hand movement to remember things better. The hand gestures are very important. So when I'm learning a difficult concept too, I have to draw it or write it on paper. There is something about paper still that is very important. And I think, so I have a little disclaimer here. And on the lighter side of life, paper still rules. This is a little ad. It's a European ad, most of you might have seen it too. It makes the point that paper is important, but in another context, but it's just fun. So, I'll just play this little video clip.
Emma. Emma.
So I think paper has a great future in the classroom too. So what about technology in the writing classroom? Now, since I am going to be talking about mobile technology, so technology can facilitate some aspects of writing, not all. I think we need to be aware of that. So, and one of the reasons also is because it's also the field that we are in. Maybe it might help people in the sciences much more, where there is more, it's more quantitative than it's qualitative. And in writing is more social in nature, and it has more individual styles, and we know that. And I think the previous speaker also talked about that a little bit. And it's the linguistic relativism too. And acquiring writing skills is a process that requires time, practice, and patience. So, and it's also kind of a deeper form of learning, which maybe mobile apps cannot completely serve that purpose, but it could serve to a limited extent. So where is it that technology can help ESL writers? Maybe when they, when it comes to kind of quote-unquote remedial help, where they need to practice repetition. For instance, vocabulary, grammar, punctuation, idiomatic expressions. Vocabulary, children are like walking tape recorders. They can learn 20 words a day, and I would be happy if I could learn 1 word a day today, right? So that is something that the phone could be useful. Sitting in the subway, I review it. And other things where technology can help students is it could help enhance their digital literacy skills. It could develop a certain amount of self-efficacy using time. And also build confidence and self-esteem among students. So here's mobile learning. So we're talking about tablets, mobile smartphones, etc. Why smartphones? Everybody owns one, simple reason. Or, I mean, a few years ago, I mean, like, there would be a few students in my class who would not have smartphones. They would have a phone, but not a smartphone. But today, everybody has it. They may necessarily not have a data plan, but once they're on campus, you know, they have the Wi-Fi that's available to them. They're portable, they're accessible, they're easy to operate. It can be used anytime, anywhere. And you want more reasons? Students are already using them. Photo notes. In fact, I saw some people taking pictures of some of the slides. That is photo notes. You write on the blackboard. Students prefer to take a picture of it. We hope that they use it. So those are photo notes. They're looking up for meanings of words. They're using it as a translating device. They're using the internet for looking up for information, and they're using images to comprehend things. So I see students constantly use the smartphones. And another reason, there are already 1.9 billion users of smartphones. We're not talking about the other phones, but smartphones. There are 1.3 million apps already available, and this was just half the number 2 years ago. And there is 75 billion downloads of mobile apps, and it's a huge billion-dollar industry, and it's only going to grow. This is from 2014, by the way, these statistics. And for learning English, there are more than 2,500 mobile apps already. And they go from anywhere from alphabets, nursery rhymes, spelling, stories, pronunciation, reading, writing, all aspects of language. This is just for English alone. Well, mobile apps are fun. They come in the game format, which students like, which students enjoy. They also present bite-sized information. The screens are small, so in a way, the bite-sized information is also good, especially when you're using that small chunk of time to learn. And they also receive immediate feedback, which I think students like to know. But it needs to be used carefully in class. So basically, I have a list of all the mobile apps for ESL students. I've got for iPhone and for Android, and some of them are free, some of them you have to pay money. So I'll just pass these handouts out. But you cannot just give students the list and send them out. It doesn't work that way. I tried that in the beginning, it didn't work. So it's very important to start them in the classroom, to have them work in groups and pairs, to have them do an exercise, and kind of get them to work in teams, and maybe to compare results, to monitor the progress as well. And in order for this whole mobile learning to be sustainable, otherwise it fizzles out very quickly. It can be in the fun game format, but it's still it's not. One needs to constantly keep in touch, go back and forth, and talk to students about how they are progressing. So most of these mobile apps are written by developers, not necessarily by classroom instructors, and that's one of the reasons. In fact, I see a lot of gaps, and if they can fine-tune some of these applications to suit the needs of the individual teacher in the classroom, I think they could be a lot more successful with the mobile apps. And I'm sure that is going to happen soon. It's just a matter of time. Today I would like to share a couple of projects that I've been working on using mobile technology. One is the student-initiated videos, and the second one is digital storytelling, and the third is something that happened while we were doing digital storytelling, and this has to do with prosody and intonation, and it is related to writing, because writing is closely related to reading, and a lot of the time students are not reading well. They lack this prosody and intonation, and we'll talk about that a little more in detail a little later. But first, the student-initiated videos. So in the student-initiated videos, what I got was I mean, there are a lot of videos already available on the on YouTube, for instance, that teach grammar and a lot of other aspects of writing. But one thing that I noticed was when a student talks to another student, there is something different. There's something else that happens. So when videos are very polished up, it's different. I don't think it has the same appeal. When students record it, there is some kind of rawness in it. I think it's the honesty, and it's also not somebody there talking to you, but it's somebody at your level talking to you. I think it's also the language, how they present themselves, somebody who looks like them, who looks like me or looks like you. And I think there is some kind of a connection that students build. So in the next one, basically this is a part of the emergent technology where it's bottom-up. So it's more the students initiating this. So here's a little video clip. Oh, I messed it up. Oh no, we passed this right. Wow, that's very touch sensitive. Okay, so here we go. So this is a student from the Dominican Republic, and so in this video she basically introduces herself first. So, where's the cursor? Okay, here we go.
Hola, mi nombre es Deyanira Santana. Soy de la República Dominicana. Soy estudiante de enfermería en la Universidad Borough Manhattan Community College. Soy madre de una hermosa niña de 2 años. Como sabrán, el ser madre, estudiante y trabajar tiempo completo es muy difícil. Gracias a que trabajo.
Okay, so this first part where she's talking, and she's speaking in Spanish, and obviously, and she's also just telling about herself. She has to work, she has to study. It's difficult, and that kind of provides that kind of relatability, with other students. So here she talks about a little problem that she experienced with pronunciation. So,
Cuando llegué aquí, el inglés se me hizo muy difícil ya que no comprendía nada de lo que decía. Una de mis grandes dificultades siempre ha sido la pronunciación. Yo decía mucho la palabra comfortable. Un día, cuando los muchachos se reían de mí, yo agarré y me puse a llorar. Entonces comprendí que decía la palabra mal. Se dice comfortable.
So one of the things over here is she's giving you a little story, and then it's a learning experience. And I think students, for some students who don't have a lot of academic literacy skills in their first language and they're learning a second language, somehow the story format is very appealing. And I think that's why children love fairy tales, and you have a little moral of the story, a learning experience that is attached to the story. And I think that might be something that appeals to other students as well. So it's that little story, and then she talks about it. And a lot of students who watch this, they remember this better, because they're remembering this, how to pronounce this word, because they've heard the story, and there's something that goes with it. So. With this, what I've done is, in this project, I don't videotape, the students videotape, they put it up on YouTube. So I don't have to worry about copyright issues, I don't have to worry about human subjects approval, etc. So they load it, and what I do is I create a website on YouTube where I borrow their links and post their links. So basically I've organized it. ESL for Arabic speakers, ESL for Spanish speakers, etc. So I put that under those categories. And it's a very sustainable project because you start collecting every year. Every semester you might get about 5, 6, 7, or 8 things uploaded. But slowly over a period of time it should add up, right?
And do they always speak in their native language, or is it?
I tell them whatever language you're comfortable in. Sometimes there's code switching that goes on. I have a Bengali speaker. I'm not using that clip today, but he speaks in English and in. But I think that's the comfort zone, whatever they're comfortable doing, and I think that's real. And people like when it's real.
Yeah.
They can sense when something is false. It's like the movies, I mean,
Yeah.
And how is the subtitle handled? Do they do it themselves, or do you do that?
Okay, now for this particular one I did it because this was one of the first ones. But I have the students do it. And if they don't, it's okay. Because this is specifically for Spanish speakers. That was the, because subtitling is a lot of work.
Yeah, yeah.
It's, and even the programs that are available currently that does the subtitling automatically are still not good enough as yet. And so this is part of the open source, materials. So once it's on YouTube, it's accessible to the public, to everybody. So this is one of the projects, and again, this can be downloaded on your phones, and they could look at a series of them and go over them. And I think this is especially great for also academic literacy itself, like what is the American classroom culture like? I think if people could speak in their language to other students who are just coming in about what the American classroom entails, I think that is a wonderful way of students getting to know what the expectations are, etc. The second one is the digital storytelling project, and many of you are familiar with digital storytelling. This is basically a personal narrative that the student writes, and that student narrative is recorded, and it's combined with images or videos and some music, and it's a little bit of technology, and voila, you have a 2-minute film about your narrative. And I'll just show you a sample of that. There are a lot of generally people do this on the computer, but there are mobile apps that now do this digital storytelling, so pretty much students can do these projects on the phone. My students do a lot of this using their smartphones. They take pictures or videos of the theme, whatever they're working on, music, and recording the narrative. That's also done on the phone. So a lot of these, even if they use the computer, a lot of this is done using the mobile application. For instance, currently, this semester, my students are working on the theme. They're working on a social issue that is of concern to them, a social issue in New York City, like the subway system or, garbage or whatever they want to talk about. So they're working on that. So here's a sample. I have to be careful again. So this is I've worked with another colleague of mine, Mary Sepp at BMCC, and this is a sample. This is a student's. She's from Colombia, and we have the permission. We have human subjects approval as well. Oh, sorry. Yeah, there we go.
Colombia is a country in the northwest region of South America, bordering to the east with Venezuela and Brazil, to the south with Ecuador and Peru, to the north with the Atlantic Ocean, and to the west with Panama and the Pacific Ocean. Colombia is a Spanish-spoken country with an interesting culture. In Colombia, we always have a reason to celebrate, no matter what time of the year it is. When you arrive in our country, you will encounter contests, carnivals, or celebrations all around. Colombians are cheerful by nature. We always keep our tradition alive from our Spanish, Indian, and African heritage. Within our carnivals, parades, dance, and horse rides, the year proceeds with our traditional music and contagious joy. Every city in Colombia has a different type of festival or party that lasts for a week. In the city that I was born, Cali, the celebration is called Feria de Cali. It starts on December 25th and goes until the 30th. It welcomes tourists from all around the world. On the 25th, the Feria de Cali starts with a salsa parade called Salsódromo. Salsódromo has dancers from different dance academies from all around the city.
La salsa habla de un lugar que hace de las calles una pista de baile. De la braveza de sus hombres. De una tierra de cañaduzales. Y de mujeres tan bellas como flores. La salsa habla de su capital mundial, Cali.
hours and take 6 months to prepare for. On the 26th, we have the cavalcade, a horse ride all along an avenue with around 5,000 horsemen. It lasts 5 hours. Then we have a parade called Cali Viejo that represents urban stories of Cali with characters who left their mark on the city. Throughout the rest of the year, there are a lot of different concerts and parties with performances from important artists from the country and all around the world. These days of celebration, we share our tasteful food like empanadas, tamales, chontaduro, lulada, and some other great dishes. Colombia is a beautiful country that enjoys celebrating parties and important holidays with all their family and friends, and also welcomes people who come from different parts of the world to enjoy and take a piece of our culture and tradition in their heart.
Okay, so basically, so for the student, I mean, who's just started learning the language, this is a big project for the student, to be able to write something, record it, and then pronounce the words, and then put the images together. But at the same time, because they have an end product and they're also sharing it with the class, there's this kind of feeling of self-empowerment toward the end of the session. So I'll move on to the third project, and this is prosody and intonation. And so I'll come back to the digital storytelling project. Now, the digital storytelling project begins with the student writing a small piece about 200 or 250 words about a narrative, a personal narrative. So in this case, for instance, the student writes about New York City, a place that they really like, a place that's special for them. And so then they write several drafts, and then once everything is ready, then we have them record the narrative. And one thing that we noticed is after the student recorded the narrative and they listened to themselves, there's something else that happened that we never expected earlier on. We thought the editing process was already over, but then that's when the second, I think, a higher level, level of a more sophisticated level of editing process kicked in. There is something that happens when the student hears himself or herself speak. And that is what I'll be coming to right now. So I'll go back to a couple of slides. So this is where prosody and intonation plays an important role. And basically prosody is nothing but the rhythm, stress, and intonation of speech. The rhythm, the flow, the pattern of flow of sound created arrangement of stressed and unstressed syllables. English is a stress time language. Indian language, for instance, is a syllable stress. Most Indian languages are syllable stress languages, and Japanese is a moraic language where you count moras and not syllables. Stress is the emphasis that given to certain syllables in a word. That's the loudness or the softness. It's actually the loudness only, and the vowel or the vowel length. And intonation is the pitch that is used. And different languages have different intonations. And a lot of research has been done here, and what they find is prosody interferes more with comprehension than mispronunciation. And the first time that I heard that, that surprised me. I thought mispronunciation was more important, but actually it is prosody. And and Rosenberg is in New York, he's at Queen's College. So a lot of studies that are done. And this is one of the reasons why, for instance, the telemarketers, I find it more difficult to understand, even though I'm from India, I find it a little more difficult to understand a telemarketer from India than a telemarketer from Philippines. Because India, it's mainly, even though most people in India do speak English, it's the prosody. The prosody is not right. And it's more difficult for Indians to get the prosody right because from the syllable stress to a stress time, it's a bigger transition. Whereas for the for Tagalog, it's different. It's more closer, even though many of them are learning English as a second language, it's easier because the prosody is easier because of the closeness of the language in terms of prosody. So, and also prosody and intonation is also about where you pause, where you chunk, where you phrase, right? So that is important. We notice this with natural backtracking and false starts in speeches. For instance, a sentence like, at 116th Street, turn to your left. No, I mean to your right. You know, if you've made a mistake here, you say no, to your right. You always go back. You don't say, at 116th Street, turn to your left. No, I mean right. You don't. You always backtrack to that prepositional phrase. So there is something there are ways in which we naturally chunk. And that's where we also pause. So we group words together in certain ways. And for second language learners, sometimes this is very difficult, and specifically for those who don't have high literacy skills in their first language. And this is important. I mean, many of you have seen this. This has made its circle on social media. Importance of commas. Let's eat grandma. Let's eat grandma. So that is, again, very important. And also for disambiguating meaning. For instance, John saw the woman with the binoculars. Now, who had the binoculars? Was it the woman who had the binoculars? There were two women, one with binoculars, one with a telescope. So which one did John see? Or did John have the binoculars, right? So it's important. How we pause, how we stress, how we emphasize, that is important. And one more thing is, so when we come to prosody, babies, apparently this happens very early on. Babies coo very differently. Italian babies coo differently from American babies. And Chinese babies coo differently from babies from Dominican Republic. So the cooing patterns are different. So what are babies actually noticing? In fact, there is, I'll just move away just to show you quickly. Many of you have seen it, so I won't go over this too much. These are the two twins from Brooklyn. They're babbling, they're just going da 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 da. But you can already see they have the question and answer intonation, and there's a lot of prosody. There are no words. But you can see that there is prosody. You know, there is no there are no words, but the babies already have it. And this goes back to a very important question. It's also controversial too. That is, what is the origin of language? Right? For a few decades now, the dominant understanding is that syntax is the basis of human language. So somebody like Chomsky would say that, language happened because there's a mutation in the brain and other some cognitive things. And so, but syntax is the basis. But there's also been another line of thought where people think it's prosody. It's the music. It came from people whistling, a long time back, prehistoric time. It came from, the way the birds sing. So there were calls, humans made calls, and language came from there. So, and even about 8 years ago, when I like evolutionary biology, in the Journal of Evolutionary Biology, I would hardly see, like once in 6 months I would come across one article that spoke about evolution of language, where prosody or music is the basis. It starts from there. But today I see more and more articles. Almost every other issue there's an article on the origin of language where music plays a primary role. And so that is kind of interesting. So there's always this question. And when I was doing my dissertation, I believed it was syntax because a lot of my faculty members were all students of Chomsky. They were all from MIT. So I was in that line of thought, and I finished my dissertation. But halfway through my dissertation, I had already shifted because I was reading about evolution. And I was pretty convinced that it must be music. But I finished my dissertation half-heartedly, but my beliefs were different, had changed by then. So the student. So here we go back to the student. The student has written the narrative, and so one of the things that I do with ESL learners is for them to understand, where to pause, where to chunk while they are reading. So an example that I have is of a student, and basically I use the Zutel and Razinski's, reading fluency rubric. And so based on this, expression and volume, phrasing, smoothness, and pace, the student that whose sample I'm going to show you, she ranks very low. Very afraid to speak, very nervous, was very conscious about her pronunciation. So basically I started with this. This is the piece that she wrote, and this is what I did. For shorter pauses, I put this line, and for longer pauses, I put a red dot. And then she practiced reading, and then she read. And so here is what I will go over. Now in this, so here, Paula Kala, who's at Rutgers, she used this phrase, glasses for the ears, but she was referring to teaching dyslexic students how to distinguish between two sounds, allophones. But I'm using it in a different sense, because over here what I see is the student beginning to see or to understand and editing at a very different level. So this student wrote this, and this sentence here where she contrasts, she says, as I looked below, I began to feel connected to the city. Now she's standing on the Empire State Building. Empire State Building was the place that she chose to write about, and because that was something very special for her. And she says, standing on the 86th floor, I felt like I was flying. I began to see that the world is very big, but our lives are very short. In New York, everyone has freedom. I can become whatever I like to be. So this sentence here, the world is very big, but our lives is very short. She did this on her own without anyone telling her. Suddenly, in her writing, she felt that she needed this. In fact, if we contrast her first original draft and this draft, you will see this difference here. When I saw the city from the 86th floor of the Empire State Building, I felt that the world is very big. I felt like I was flying. Everybody is fighting their own life. I'm busy with my life. My mind is thinking about those things. I realized our life is small. In New York, everyone has freedom. So that was that original one, and this is something that the student worked on her own. And this came with a little bit of other sample sentences. Standing on the 86th floor, I felt like I was flying. This was something to do with an exercise that we did in class, but this was her own. And so this is after the recording, and she says, can I rewrite the script again? Right, so that is something that happened. So this is her story, and again, remember, the student, very shy, didn't want to say anything, and it's very short, and this is her digital story.
As I looked below, I began feeling connected to the city in a number of ways. Standing on the 86th floor, I felt like I was flying in the sky. I began to see that the world is very big, but our lives are short. In New York, everyone has freedom. I can become whatever I like to be. I can be a nurse at a hospital, a teacher at a school, or a banker.
Okay, so that was the paragraph that I just picked that particular. I clipped the video. So this again, it's a very short video, but the students enjoy it. And what this did to the student was when she shared this in class, somehow she had gained a little confidence. This is a student who never participated, but after this was over, she volunteered once to read aloud in class, and that was the biggest, it was a happy moment for all of us. So some of the classroom applications, and I think the smartphones are very useful for students to use this in their editing process, I think. Students can, when they're looking at each other's drafts and, reading it, students can read their drafts aloud to themselves, that they can do that. When they're sitting with the teacher, they can, I always have them read it. So that is one way. You can have the students read their draft aloud to appear in class. But then what I've started recently after this experience is that I have students record their essays and listen to it, and then revise it. And there is something else that happens, and I'm still trying to figure out what is it, what is that. Initially they hate it. They hate to listen to themselves speak. They say, I don't think this is the way I sound, I don't like myself. I said, you don't have to, I don't have to listen to it. You listen to it yourself in the privacy of your own home, and then you go ahead and edit it. And so this is, but this is a study that needs to be done. So what is the future of mobile learning? I think it has a very good future. I think the phones are only going to get lighter, smarter, cheaper, and we probably could even wear them around our wrist. We are going to get, I think they're going to replace computers, desktops very soon. In fact, I don't know how many people, we have desktops at work, but I don't have a desktop at home anymore. My laptop is enough, and most of the time I'm working now on my iPad mini, which has a little keyboard. Keyboard is small, but very soon you can, it'll project a keyboard on any surface, and you can make this big or small, And we will not need an LCD projector like this, and we can use this entire wall. That would have been really nice, right, for the presentation. So it will have an LCD projector inbuilt. Apparently it is a prototype, but it's too expensive. It just has to get cheaper. And I can't wait for this one. I'm going to watch all my George Clooney movies on the phone. And yeah, so that was my presentation. Thank you. Any questions? Yeah.
How would you grade those presentations?
Yeah. Very excellent question. Yeah. Actually,
it
we
seems
have
so subjective. I don't know. Maybe
it is. In some ways, it is. Yes, but we do have a rubric. We have a rubric that we use for digital storytelling, and in fact it's in a paper that's published, it's online. It's Mary Sepp and Bandi-Rao. It's in the New York State TESOL Journal, which has the rubric there. You can use it. It's basically what we do is once students have completed their project, so we screen about 3 or 4 in every class. So we have about 3 classes a week. So we screen about 3 or 4, and they're just very short. They're just 2.5 minutes long, so it goes very fast. So we screen it, and students talk about it, and there's a format, and this is very good because students learn to criticize other people's work and take criticism. They learn that discourse, and then they fill out these little forms. And basically, what we do, even before we have students use a rubric to give feedback. It's actually feedback, it's not grading. Feedback to other peers. We practice it with a couple of sample digital storytelling projects that we've created. Projects that are good, mid-level, and poor. So we kind of have them do that, and then they provide feedback to their peers. And of course, the teacher also provides feedback. So it is, it's that. So it's the course that I'm teaching is a non-credit course. So it works well. Yeah, when it's credit bearing, it is subjective, and I think essay writing is subjective too. Yeah.
Do you show them how to make the videos with images and the audio, or do they already?
I'm surprised. Most students do know how to work.
I don't. I would be afraid to ask them to do it if I didn't know.
But we do have. Actually, we have always a handful of students who are not sure. So we do a couple of things. One is there are students who know it very well. So I take a consensus. So students know. So I pair up students who are not very sure, but students who are sure. So they work together. Then for students who don't know how to use technology, we team up with the people in the computer lab. And and that's very important to team up with the people in the computer lab, let them know what you're doing, what your expectations are, so we all have a meeting, we get together, so we're all on the same page. And they attended the training workshop on digital storytelling with us, so they're aware. And so we send them to them, and so they work with them one-on-one, and if students having a lot of difficulty, yes. Yeah. But technology, you will be surprised, it's actually much simpler than you realize it is. And it can be done on the phone. There are a couple of apps,
Okay.
It actually does it. Puts everything together. Yeah. So it's an early lunch.